Okay, so picture this. It's the dead of night, Easter morning 2008. A nearly 200-foot fishing vessel just vanishes into the freezing waters of the Bering Sea. This throws 47 people into the ocean and kicks off one of the most incredible rescue missions you've ever heard of. All right, let's get right into the story of disaster, strategy, and just unbelievable courage.
So where are we getting all this from? Well, our whole explainer is built around the official U.S. Coast Guard investigation that happened right after. This report is fascinating. It doesn't just break down what went wrong on the ship, but also everything that went right in the response that pulled 42 people from some of the deadliest waters on the planet.
And that right there, that's the central question, isn't it? This isn't some rescue a few miles offshore. We're talking about the edge of the world. The distances are just massive. The weather is brutal, and your survival time is measured in minutes before the cold takes you. So how on earth do you even begin to pull off a rescue like this?
Here's how we're going to tackle it. We'll start with the ship's final frantic moments. Then we'll get into the race against the clock, looking at both the official Coast Guard strategy and the amazing actions of a nearby civilian ship. Finally, we'll see the outcome and the huge lessons learned from it all. First, let's set the scene on the ship itself. The Alaska Ranger was a fish processing vessel, a big one, with a crew of 47. They were heading out to the fishing grounds, but in the pitch black of the early morning, a single alarm starts to go off, and it signals the beginning of the end.
That's the call that crackled into the Coast Guard station at 2:46 a.m. The voice on the other end sounds pretty calm, but the situation was spiraling out of control. They had an unstoppable flood starting deep in the back of the ship.
And things went south fast. I mean, look at this timeline. In just about 2 hours, the Alaska Ranger goes from a working ship to a tomb at the bottom of the sea. The water spreads, then all the lights go out, plunging them into total darkness. And then comes the order no sailor ever wants to hear: abandon ship into 32-degree water.
So now you have 47 people floating in the icy dark, and their biggest enemy isn't just hypothermia, it's something called the tyranny of distance. The Bering Sea is one of the most remote places on Earth, and help is a long, long way away.
This map really tells the story. See that little RA for Alaska Ranger? They are way out there. The nearest Coast Guard ship, the Monroe, is more than 100 miles away. The main airbase in Kodiak? Forget about it. It's way off to the east. Any response was going to have to be a massive, coordinated effort against a furiously ticking clock.
Let's just put that number into perspective. 800 nautical miles. That's how far away the main Coast Guard air station was. A helicopter trying to fly from there? It would have been a recovery mission, not a rescue. No way they'd make it in time.
Now, the Coast Guard cutter Monroe, she was closer, 127 nautical miles. As soon as they got the call, they turned and started racing towards the scene at full speed. But even so, that's still hours away, hours these fishermen just didn't have. But here's where the first piece of incredible luck comes in. The Alaska Ranger's sister ship, the Alaska Warrior, heard the call. And they were only 40 miles away, already pushing through the waves to get there. They were going to be the first on scene.
So yeah, a bit of luck was involved for sure. But this rescue? It wasn't just luck. It was an absolute testament to smart planning and years of strategic thinking. The Coast Guard's preparedness was the real hero of this story.
You really have two different rescue efforts happening at the same time. On one hand, you've got the U.S. Coast Guard with this big, coordinated air and sea response. And on the other, you have the Alaska Warrior, a civilian fishing boat whose crew is about to perform one of the most amazing rescues you can imagine, using just what they had on deck. So, how was the Coast Guard able to respond so effectively from so far away? It all comes down to this one brilliant idea: strategic forward basing. Basically, it means you don't keep all your stuff at home. You figure out where the trouble is likely to happen, and you move your rescue assets there before you need them. And this right here was the absolute game changer. The Coast Guard knew the fishing fleet would be out there, so they moved a Jayhawk helicopter to the tiny, remote St. Paul Island. That single move cut the flight distance from an impossible 800 miles down to just under 200. It was a strategic decision that directly saved lives, period.
And that Jayhawk wasn't acting alone. The Coast Guard threw everything they had at this. You have the cutter Monroe steaming to the scene, which also has its own smaller helicopter, and flying high above it all, a C130 Hercules plane. Think of the C-130 as the quarterback, the eyes in the sky, coordinating the whole rescue, spotting those little flashing strobe lights in the dark, and guiding everyone in.
So while this massive official response is getting underway, the crew of the Alaska Warrior is closing in, and they're about to show the world what pure grit and ingenuity look like. Just before 7:30 in the morning, the Warrior arrives, and they find it, a life raft, getting tossed around on the rough seas, packed with freezing, exhausted survivors. But now they have a new problem. How do you get those guys from that raft onto your ship in these conditions? This part is just incredible. Their first idea, a rescue ladder, was a non-starter. The seas were just too high. It was way too dangerous. So, thinking on their feet, they came up with a brilliant plan. They grabbed a harness, rigged it to one of their deck cranes, and turned a piece of fishing gear into a lifeline, hoisting the survivors up to safety one by one.
Okay, so the sun is now up over the Bering Sea. You have helicopters plucking people from the water and the waiter's crew working their crane. It's this massive, chaotic, but successful rescue operation. So let's look at the final numbers. The numbers really do tell a powerful story. Out of 47 crew members who went into the water, 42 were saved. The Coast Guard helicopters pulled 20 people out, and the crew of the Alaska Warrior, with their improvised crane, they rescued 22. It's just a stunning success. But you can also see that, tragically, 5 souls were lost to the sea that day. After any disaster like this, you have to ask the hard questions. What can we learn? And the investigation into the Alaska Ranger sinking did just that, trying to make sure a tragedy like this would never happen again. And the final report was crystal clear. It called the Coast Guard's effort timely and effective. It specifically pointed to that forward-based helicopter as a critical reason so many were saved. It also recommended tougher ship inspections to prevent these kinds of sinkings in the first place. But most of all, it praised the exceptional performance of both the Coast Guard and the crew of the Alaska Warrior.
So in the end, the rescue of the Alaska Ranger's crew is a story of two equal, vital parts. You have the long-term strategic planning of the Coast Guard on one side, and on the other, you have the split-second, on-the-spot courage of a fishing crew. It really makes you wonder, when everything goes wrong, what saves us? Is it the brilliant plan made years in advance, or is it the incredible bravery of people in the moment?